All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm super excited for today's episode. I have a good friend of mine who I met while down here in Georgia. His name is Nico Moyer, and he's going to be speaking in a minute. But just to give you a context of who Nico is, he is kind of where I envision myself post-military. Let's say that, Nico. He was in a Ranger Regiment for the entirety of his military career, which was 6 years. And now he's a full-time student at Columbus State University, where he's getting an undergraduate, correct me if I'm wrong, in entrepreneurship, and then a master's degree in organizational leadership, servant leadership field, which I think is pretty awesome in and of itself, because I am a huge proponent of the servant leadership style. And also, he is a life coach, and he has established a business for himself called Coaching Beyond, where he's really working with individuals to empower them to get a better sense of their identity and to progress in life, just like all of us should. But one of the things I think distinguishes you, Nico, is just your real commitment to service. I'm not only talking about military service, but community service, being active in your local, in Columbus in general, and really striving to make a difference however you can. So, Nico, I thank you, and thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Just like you have a vision right now for what you're looking for after you move through the military. And not a lot of us do that. Not enough of us do that. And I thought I had all these plans. I thought I kind of knew what I was going to do. And then a 20-year career gets cut short when you medically retire, and all of a sudden you got to figure it out. So I'll just say props to you for really, planting this seed now, instead of waiting till you're where I'm at to try and start a podcast and start communicating and building a community or a tribe behind this. Hey, it's one life, and
Exactly.
there's so many proponents to that. There's so many people that come in and out of that over our lifetimes. So it's great to connect and see the parallels between our worlds. And I
Oh yeah,
appreciate you
man.
having me on.
And I definitely look up to you, and it's good. It was, like I said, it's really good to have you to share your ideas, specifically because I know that there are a lot of people in the military that listen to this, and to know that there is another world that you can step into once you're done with the military. Because
Absolutely.
a lot of, and you can definitely attest to this. Some people look at it, and this is my perception, at least. I'm not there yet, but once they leave the military, it's like, okay, now what's next? Just like you were saying. And we'll dive into that a little bit. Obviously, we touched on your military time and so forth, but take us back a little bit to who Nico was growing up, and then how you made it to where you are now, going and getting your master's, and also establishing a business which is centered around life coaching, which is very distinct and unique in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, going back, I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm originally from up north. Just lived in Columbus the last 10 years. Grew up with my mom initially. Parents were divorced, great parents. They were separated. So grew up kind of on the shoreline. At about 15, I ended up moving in with my dad. So a whole change of scenery. But that really opened up a lot of doors for me, because it got me into a town with a bigger football program. It got me away from some of the areas in my life that I needed to get away from. Otherwise, I would have ended up on a path that probably was less desirable than I have now. And then I played football there. I got a scholarship to go play football in college, and I broke my leg. So immediately, life's hurdle number one, dreams smashed. We all think we're going to go play pro or college, and regardless, you still want to be able to play at whatever level you can get to. So that was a very eye-opening time in my life. But that was a pivotal point, because I was not an academic student. Athletics always came first, social life came second, academics didn't even make third. So that was the only reason I got into college, because I was originally denied because of my GPA, and football is what got me in. Although that drifted, I was there. So I decided to make the most of it after I made the mistake my freshman year of still doing the same stupid stuff. A 1.9 GPA later, I said, I need to change this. And I just kind of pulled my head out of the backside. I made a decision in my life in that moment that I'm done just kind of sliding by. I was a very big fish in a very small pond. And now I'm in the world of a big pond, and I'm the little fish, and it's time to get to work and to put the muscle on the bones. So I turned that around, and in 2 years, I finished the rest of my college. So I graduated a year early. I went from a 1.9 to a cumulative GPA of a 3.3. Um, and somewhere in my sophomore year, I just enlisted. Don't ask me the story. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I woke up. I was called to serve in the military. I rode my bike to a recruiter station. I was like, dude, sign me up. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? I don't care. I don't know. I didn't do any research. I looked up your address. I biked here with MapQuest because that's what it was like back then. And I just signed up. Um, Luckily, in basic training in 2011, I graduated top of my class. Somehow I got honor grad. It was just an awesome position to be in at that moment, and they offered me an option 40 contract. What's that? I didn't know either. That's Ranger Regiment. So next thing you know, I'm going through these medical waivers to try and go to the airborne school because of my leg. 4 specialists later, I get approved, make it through airborne school, run up the street to RASP, start 2 months of just hell, honestly. We were in the class that was recorded for 2 weeks of hell, um, which was interesting because, you go through what every class goes through. But if it happened when the cameras weren't there, when they showed up, you did it again. So it kind of is a very much a double-edged sword. Not to mention, you don't want anybody to watch you while you're in the most darkest place of your life, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But it was a great experience. And then, right up there, my military career started. I bounced from school to school, any opportunity they had, and I know we'll touch on this later. I took it. Got to go through Pathfinder School, assault climber, EMT, the whole works. I was able to do so many and learn so many awesome things in that time. And it was great. And then finally, my third deployment, I started getting these bad migraines. Every time we were flying on the birds, I was getting really nauseous and sick. I didn't know what was up. I went and got checked out, and I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury from a jump back in 2014. So that with the leg, the Army knows how to do math. 2 + 2 = broken, and they kicked me out. No hard feelings, but like you said, it's a huge, and we'll get to this also, but it's a huge transition. And yeah, we acknowledge in the military that there's a civilian world and it's different. But we also have this kind of arrogance sometimes that it's easier. And that's not necessarily the case. And, look on any corner and you'll see that there's veterans, old and young, that are homeless, that are struggling with social skills, that just have so many different issues that they're trying to work through. And a lot of that is amplified because we don't recognize the transition we're about to make, and we really take that for granted. And the first year, I faked it till I made it, right? I felt good. I'd never suffered with depression or PTSD or anything like that. But about a year and a half in, I did realize the emotional connections are the hardest thing to replicate when you get out. And anybody military or who truly understands military lifestyle listening gets this. But it's very hard to replicate the bonding experiences that you've had to go through in the military. And in fact, most people don't want to replicate those. It's a lot like Survivor, when you're on two different tribes, even if you don't know each other, after you go through that darkest night, that longest time without food, or that hardest challenge, all of a sudden those alliances are cool, but there's this core bonding that's occurred, whether you recognize it or not, that's gonna make your emotional side of the game difficult. And that's something I've really had to acknowledge and understand transitioning to civilian life. And that's why it's great being a coach, because as a coach, you are called to tear yourself apart first, really analyze yourself. So it gave me a really solid year to just focus on, who's Nico, what's my foundation, how can I actually help people, what people actually want me to help them, etc. So, that's the history that's kind of brought us up to today. And that's my general, my 30-second pitch of my life, if you will.
Yeah, that's so much to uncover right there. And I'm just curious, what did you end at the end of your military career? What was your function or role within the Ranger Regiment?
Yeah. So I'll preface this with I was this E5 sergeant, but I was a headquarters platoon sergeant. So basically, I would have been coming up on taking a squad, promoting to E6. But because they knew I was on my way out because of my medical issues, they needed somebody administratively that could support the kind of C2 element, right? So, you got first sergeant, XO, your commander. So I worked really closely with the XO, which was awesome because it took all of those courses that we had talked about, and I was in a function that really exploited all of those. So, when you're a headquarters platoon sergeant, you're working with all the enablers, so you have to understand their jobs and skill sets. You're conducting the backside support for training. So I could set up some type of ropes or CSAR type rescue system, have somebody else set it up, but I was also fit to assess that. So you didn't need 5 people to come in and do these different jobs because I was already certified or qualified at whatever level was required to do that. So it made functioning as a company really, really smooth and really efficient. Because I absolutely, I get it, right? In the Army, we all think we're the best, but you take us away, somebody goes in the next day. I firmly believe that's true. But I was a very good resource for the company at that time, and they knew exactly how to utilize me as efficiently as possible. So it was a great opportunity to be in a position far above where I should have been, but to be able to successfully complete that, even though I don't see the benefits of retiring at a higher pay grade or
Right,
something. But
right.
it's all, life's about the experiences, and I believe that. And even when that doesn't work in my favor, I believe that life is absolutely about the experiences.
Yeah. So, and we were talking about this prior, is the only reason you were able to go into a position like that and really have the impact that you were able to have was because you were really fixed on ensuring that you were an asset to the team. You were an asset to the organization instead of being someone, and I'm not saying that anyone is like this in particular, but being someone that's just okay, being where they are. You were always searching out more opportunities to make sure that you were needed. You were a guy that was a true asset and you added value instead of just being a gray man or a woman and just being there. So talk to me a little bit about what, because I think this is interesting and everybody can apply this to their own life and their own personal growth and development is, how were you able to understand that in order to be the best me that I can be, I have to start being an asset? Because I think that's something I never really heard put that way until you said it to me, and is really intriguing.
Yeah. Honestly, it was super selfish initially. I, but my whole philosophy in life is that I'm a kid. And even in my coaching practice, most of what I'm doing is trying to pull people back to their childhood. We put so many boundaries and boxes and limits as we get older as adults, right? Like math is everywhere. Fibonacci's number, law of averages, law of large numbers. I mean, statistically, math exists everywhere in nature, in man-made everything. But for some reason, once you hit, 7th or 8th grade, math is put into math class. And we stop stretching it across the different domains. So what happens? You're a kid. I was not always a not I'm no physical specimen by any means, but I was never a 205, 12% body fat 16-year-old. I was a squirrely 5'9" skinny dude with braces and glasses. So naturally you get picked last. All right, well, how do I not get picked last? Well, I got to be better at that thing. Okay, well, if I get better at that, it's going to help me over here in this other social aspect or this sports team. And all of a sudden, I started connecting things, and I started realizing really young and really early that everything's connected. And that's like the economist's dream is everything's connected, right? But don't think about it in how do I get ahead with that, but how do I make myself the most versatile being possible? Because a big issue, even today, we have so many issues of equality or equity and inclusion or exclusion. And we're thinking about all these things, and so often we're finding somebody to blame. And for me, if I'm going to blame somebody, I want to know pretty darn well that I did everything in my power to be able to consciously say this is your fault. So I take my life into my own hands. So when was that crystallized, right? When did that notion or that hunch become something that I really started to live by? And that was the military. You learn really quickly your first deployment. When numbers get cut, the lowest guy gets cut first. It's a totem pole. It's just like Survivor. And I reference Survivor a lot because I think that's a really good bridge for people between military and civilian. because you have the social, physical, and mental aspects of that game that's relatable, but you don't have to define all the jargon of the military. Um, but I realized really quickly, well, if I'm the EMT, then and they have to cut somebody, they're not going to cut the medic, and they're not going to cut the EMT who can support the medic. Plus, I can shoot, right? You're gonna cut the private that can shoot. Okay, well, what about next deployment? Now all of a sudden we're transitioning the thought of war and saying, hey, we want to hand this back over to the Afghan people and help support them. We're going to take more of them out on missions and less of us. Oh man, now how do I stay? Oh, well, I'm a C-star expert now that can set up ropes, that can free climb, that can do all these things in terms of rescuing somebody in some type of situation. One more reason not to cut Nico off the team, right? So it initially was selfish, but now where I find that benefit is that it doesn't matter, right? Because coaching, a lot of people, we get in these niches. What's my niche? And this is all business. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, I know you're thinking this too, like, man, everybody's telling me to narrow down my niche, but I don't want to exclude people. I don't have a niche. I coach people. I don't coach positions. I don't coach, jobs. I coach people. And I'm able to use all these crazy, unrelated experiences to help people understand and use things in different contexts, just like using a metaphor, only I'm doing it in real time. And my favorite example quickly is just a kid rock climbing, right? You take a kid to a rock gym, he hates it or she falls and she thinks it's silly, but then they eventually get it. And they have no idea that they're conditioning themselves to understand that if I don't get it the first time, but I try again, I'm going to let a little further, and then I'm going to get a little further, and then I complete it. So now when they go back to school and a math problem is difficult, they don't walk away from it. They say, man, rock climbing was hard too. And they don't say this, right? I'm saying this as an adult who studies people and behavior. The kid doesn't say this, but the kid intuitively understands if I try something more than once, eventually I'm going to figure it out. And I may have weaknesses that will never become strengths, but I have things that can constantly improve, right? And that's how I live my life, and that is what has driven me to become as overqualified, honestly, as I am, because I just love knowledge and I love being able to use that knowledge to support others in their walk of life.
Yeah, so versatility is the name of the game for you, just making
Absolutely.
making oneself, and that's a great way to put it. And the way I like to think about that is, yes, versatile in terms of what we bring to our jobs, our professions, but like you just said, making yourself over why am I blanking right now? I don't know.
Qualified.
But anyways, overqualified. Thank you. By having knowledge in different areas that you can tap into. I think that is something that we can all benefit from, because I feel if you just have one specialization in general, then you're missing out on a lot of other perceptions and perspectives of what is out there in the world. And
Yeah.
you said a lot there that I want to dive into. But first off, I want to share a quick story with you. And this goes back to another podcast I did. And his name is Mike Corey. Now, Mike is he travels the world, and he gets recorded by all these different TV, like BBC and all of these big companies, because he goes around and he unveils all of these like hidden gems that are found throughout the world, like these castles in the middle of Chile. And I mean, just crazy, absurd things. And he loves what he does. And he told me this the other day. He said, I'm just doing what I loved as a child. Now I'm just an adult and I'm doing it. He said,
Exactly.
as a child, I loved to go out into the woods, flip rocks and see what was underneath. He says, now I'm doing the same thing. I just don't flip as many rocks, but I'm going around the world doing exactly what it was that I loved when I was a child. But exactly what you said is so the first thing I want to touch on is that you think of yourself as a child, or you said something along the lines of that. And then that's your approach to coaching. You want to get people closer to having the creative imagination and possibility that they had when they were a child. So the question I pose to you is, why is that sense of individuality and creativity stripped from us in like the 7th, 8th grade, and then continuously stripped from us as we go through high school, college, and become part of society in a more contribution type of way?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because the when you look at it, it almost seems like it's both ways, right? Like America is one of the most individualistic cultures remaining, in terms of individualism and how we identify so uniquely. Everywhere else you go, Africa, Afghanistan, all over the world, there's still some type of tribal divide or familial divide, or even geographical divides that people identify with. And less we are doing that in the US, but in the academic and pursuit of knowledge field, it's the inverse. It is getting more uh, generalized and collective, which it shouldn't, because look at where the market's going, right? If you specialize in one thing and only one thing, you're either going to have a competitor enter the market and you're going to fail, or your market's going to be too small and you're going to fail. So you have to have knowledge, knowing that, hey, if you went to school to be a CPA, well, guess what? Now there's all these different suites offered to do that. Can you still get a job? Absolutely. Does it make it harder? 100%. Because we're put into classifications. Our education system is so pipeline driven that there's no opportunity to even try to understand what other knowledge is out there that you might love and enjoy and be passionate about and want to work 80 hours a week lovingly to do. Instead, we're told, really, what, high school? People are already deciding colleges based on what they want to do for the rest of their life, right? We're even in college, it's like, you, I use the VA for my benefits, right? I have the GI Bill. I cannot take a class that is not in my degree plan. I get it, right? It's a benefit. I don't want to waste the money, but that goes to show you how the system operates. The second you enter college, you are pressured from day one to identify a degree plan that you want to be in and start taking those. And if you're not sure and you think you might have a passion for literature also, too bad, unless you want to pay an extra $600 to take that course in a $500 textbook, right? So as a society, we are quite individualistic, but in terms of our education and pipelines, I think we're very narrow-minded, partially because we wanted a better life, right? So we left the trades, we left manual labor and started pushing college on everybody to try and give everybody a more relaxing, longevity based life. But now we're realizing, dang, we put all our eggs in one basket and pushed everybody there. Now we're begging people to do trades again instead of, hey, go do what you love. Because guess what? Somebody's going to love plumbing. Somebody loves masonry work. Somebody loves janitorial work, right? A lot of people, we look down at a janitor or whatever else, but you go talk to that guy, he's like, dude, I just love kids, man. I'm retired. So I want to work in a school as a janitor and watch these, third graders' eyes light up when I'm not just some dude sweeping the floor, but I'm building relationships. So if we allowed people to navigate that process in life, and if in fact we supported that structurally within the system that we had for education, it would happen. Because I'm blessed. People think I got it figured out. No, I signed up to do the army and I left in a better position than I went in, broken and hurting, and I have all these issues I have to deal with, but I'm blessed with the opportunity to find out what I really want to do, regardless of, can I put food on the table tomorrow? And I wish more people had that opportunity. My sole purpose in life to get rich is to be able to help people do that, right? Give me money so I can let people experience what I did, in really taking a year to figure out, hey, this isn't going to pay the most up front, but it's going to pay the most for the rest of my life. And that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that man, you're really firing me up right now. And that's because one of the things I'm most passionate about is that the university system, high school system, really it sets us up to be machines rather than being people, right? It teaches us how to deal with all these functions like Excel, like Microsoft Office, like becoming an accountant, and then eventually becoming a CPA, becoming programmers. But where in the system are they teaching us or enabling us to discover who we actually want to be? Because for me, one of the things that I've come across or noticed is that, well, not even noticed, I just look at research and statistics. 70% of people in the workforce are not happy in what they do. They go to work miserable every day. And in my opinion, and I don't know if you want to speak to this as well, it's because people are choosing what they want to do before they focus on who they want to become. So then they get in the position or the job, and then they're like, wait, there's a big piece missing, and it goes back to the fact that it doesn't align with the person that they're supposed to actualize or become one day. So it's like we're doing things inverse. Instead of starting from the bottom, we start from the instead of starting from the inside, we start from the outside.
Yep.
Only to come to realize that we should have started from the inside from the very start. Go ahead.
And it's because it's a race. And that's the problem is it takes us until we're 50, unless we're one of those select few that are just like that free spirit who just has that old wisdom. We don't understand until we're 50, like, holy crap, man, like this is a finite race. And at the end of the day, nobody's sitting there saying, I wish I made more money when they die. They're saying, I wish I spent more time with family. I wish I followed my actual dreams. Blah, blah, blah. Listen to those people, man. We read it, we share it, we cry real quick, we retweet it, and we're like, man, well, then do it. If you're resharing something on Facebook, you better be trying to implement that in your own life before you're trying to share it with everybody else. Right? It's the same with the negative stuff. Read the article before you share it. What we see on Facebook right now is the epitome of exactly what we're talking about. People are trained to just find an answer, not the right answer, not a educated, filled answer. We're trained. And you see that this year, especially because of the social issues, but also in school. Everybody's got a check account. Everybody's just trying to get by. People are cheating. The schools are having to set up proctor stuff so that less people can cheat. But what do you want? This is what we've done. Everything's a multiple choice standardized test, and that's why I can't wait till grad school. And here's the deal. I'm not blaming the universities. I get it. It's a huge infrastructure. It's just like the United States economy. Nothing changes overnight, and it takes an overhaul to fix it. But we have to acknowledge that, we're our own worst enemy. We beg for technology, and then we hate that our information's out there. We ask for some way to save our passwords, and then we hate that somebody could hack into our system and steal our passwords. It's like, look, don't get at Jeff Bezos when you're the one ordering everything off Amazon. Right? Like, look, I can't be mad at Jeff Bezos for how much money he has because I don't own Amazon. Right. And like, I don't employ hundreds of thousands of people. So, does he have his own personal stuff? Maybe. But to just blanketly say that somebody with money, because then we start latching everybody in, is evil or bad is just not true. That guy did exactly what I did. He said, hey, I need to be versatile. I'm going to sell these books. Oh, man, less people are buying books. I got to start selling some other junk. Oh, man. Boom. And constantly innovating. Even now, they fired all their drivers and they're going back into this local delivery system to try and produce more jobs and give more people individual control of their lives and start businesses. Whether you give Jeff Bezos credit for that or not, that is a practice where what we're complaining about in an educational conversation is being implemented. And he's saying, I hear you. I see these issues. Here's how we're going to adjust and innovate to stay relevant. And that's why their market cap is as big as it is.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy. I know you've seen the picture, and most of us have seen a picture where he started off, and I think it was his garage or bedrooms in his house. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But once again, you pointed out versatility. It was a key that he was always willing to adapt. And a perfect example of this was how Blockbuster was so prevalent at one time. I remember as a kid, I loved Blockbuster, going to the physical store and picking out the video game or picking out the movie, and then, going through the whole process, returning it a week later.
Yeah.
And here comes along Netflix.
Yeah.
And started off as this little company, but they had the first mover advantage. They came into a market, and this is a brand new idea. We're just going to put things online. We're going to set up the streaming service. And then Blockbuster just stayed where they were and eventually just went out of business instead of coming and getting in the race to develop and catch up to Netflix and beat them. So they stood stagnant. Netflix just kept going.
Yep. And what's happening now? Netflix has 100 other competitors. They have other issues coming up. And that is the college student who focuses only on one path of knowledge. I'm not saying don't go to college, right? You want to be a lawyer or CPA, go do it. But still be doing those things that take you one step away from that in different directions. So that way, when, Hulu, Amazon Video, and all these other things come into play, cool. I just got to sidestep right. And I've been training for this for years. And we know this in the military, right? No one position above, one position below. If my gunner goes down, I can pick up the gun and shoot. And if my platoon sergeant goes down, I know the entire plan and I could play up a level and help run and lead the platoon. And that's all we're doing, except instead of our position in the hierarchy of a business, we're looking at our business kind of laterally and saying, oh, I got to switch lanes real quick because there's an accident up ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the way for me personally, when looking at college, since we are on, we're talking a lot about the educational system. I think the one of the reasons why people get to a point where they're so narrow-minded and then they come to find out they're not even fulfilled or happy in that narrow-minded vision that they have is the fact that they look at college as an ends to a means. I go to college to get good grades, to get a job. My approach or my thinking, and actually if someone adopts it, will do better in college than if you just had that single narrow-minded mindset, was that college, and you'll never have this opportunity again, college is the perfect time to go on a 4-year journey of self-discovery.
Exactly.
When you frame it that way, you don't think, oh, I'm just going here to get a job, but I'm going here to find out about myself. And as a result of that, you find out strengths, weaknesses, passion,
Yep.
vision, values, virtues, principles. And then out of that comes your profession, whatever clubs you want to join. And then doors start opening themselves because you've opened yourself up to a new possibility instead of just being so focused on becoming an accountant.
100%.
Now you know what's important to you, what values you want to live by, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
I wish, and this is a question I asked one other person and it threw them off guard. But I think you'll have a good answer for this one. And it was, if you were in charge of that educational overhaul, right, where would be a good place to start to try to reverse this pyramid or this circle of just go to school, get a job, do a job that the world says is success, and then you're not happy, and then you're one of those 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds that say, I wish I would have done this, that, and the other thing. So if you're in charge of that educational overhaul, where do you start?
Yep. Same where I start everywhere else. I build up a board. I am I could be arrogant sometimes, right? I work real hard for the stuff that I've had, and the military kind of reinforced that a little bit. It's not this cockiness like, oh, I think I'm the best. Like, I'm going to prove I'm the best in something. And if I am, I'm going to own that. And I know that I wouldn't be the best person. So I would absolutely surround myself with the right people. Making the Impossible Possible was this phenomenal book. Kirkland is the last name, and I wish I had his full name, but he started this clay resource. Really, it was this little center. Man, I think it was in Detroit, and I don't want to chop this off, so go read the book. But basically, instead of creating an after-school program where as adults, right, because that's a problem, is the people trying to offer help always offer help from their perspective and from their truths. I deal with this a lot in the homeless community. I teach a jobs class at Safe House, and some of that population is homeless. And we talk about this, so many people want to do a homeless go bag, and they give them, this big thing of baby powder. Well, baby powder doesn't do anything for me if I can't shower. So that just goes to prove how disconnected the servants are from those trying to receive from us. And if we just shut up and stop telling everybody how we can help them or how we can fix them, and this is a huge struggle as a coach. You constantly have to remember that you're trying to help people, but you're also trying to help people on their terms when they identify they need. You don't go up to somebody and say, "Hey, you're fat. I'm a weight loss coach. You should hire me." Right? You're waiting until somebody says, "Hey, whatever my body image is, I'm uncomfortable with it. I want to work with X, Y, and Z for that." That's when it happens. So surrounding people like Mr. Kirkland, who had built this, amazing, unconventional space for people in a gang-ridden, poverty-driven community to come and listen to jazz music and make clay pottery. Crazy. Everybody challenged him. He hassled by the police, you know, and he's an African American gentleman back, I forget what year, but you know, just as many social issues as currently, sadly. But he proved that everything doesn't have to be the way it has been. And all of a sudden, problems started fixing themselves, and the area around the space started to clean up, and then people started coming in. And now, I mean, it's millions. There's $1 million fountain in the dead center of the ghetto, essentially, but it's telling those people that they're worth it. So taking a leader like him and bringing him on a board, and then taking somebody else who also believes in some type of challenging the status quo in the educational system and doing that. But ultimately, I think it starts getting coaches with young children and teachers, and really um, helping them learn how to challenge their educators.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
there needs to be, I think there needs to be a lot less accountability on teachers in terms of what are your test scores, you're fired, and they need to be held accountable and told, hey, we support you. Go and be innovative. Go and teach different things. Um, you know, but it's hard because I'm a guy who identifies problems and I hate talking about them without a solution, because there is certain math we need to know. Right. But I think there needs to be something in writing that says, hey, we're going to update this every 5 years. Y'all don't need to learn how to balance a checkbook anymore. For some reason, that's still something that's taught. Dave Ramsey's been pushing for years to have a better personal finance class, and it's called Foundations. And still less than 50% of schools actually utilize that. So that to me is like, what would I do? I don't know. Probably fire everybody first, because obviously somewhere, you know, there's people resisting the change. And usually that's higher up the totem pole. But I think that as we get younger, more technology connected individuals in teaching, and they move up, they'll challenge the innovation. And I call every teacher and everybody in whatever field they're in that thinks it needs to change to start being the person, start planting the seeds, because eventually it was one idea and one action that build on top of the other that actually elicited that change. Because look, we're not going to wake up tomorrow and fix it. As much as we want reform, same with the police, right? There's problems in both of those areas. It's not going to get fixed overnight, but it starts with all of us holding the people that we can within our span of control accountable. Because we all call the president, we're like, fix America, but we're not yelling at the 5 people that we actually can change
Right.
or challenge. We're not doing that.
Right.
So back to before, I'm not going to call out anybody else until I got my own ducks in a row, and I've made sure that everybody around me is held accountable for their social insensitivity or racial insensitivity or whatever thing they're doing that's hindering our growth as a community.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, Nico, that I think people could take away from you is, and it's really cool to see, is that you're so open-minded. And I'm looking at, and I'm taking, I told you, I'm taking a course on NLP, and there is a big distinction between mental rigidity, that my way is the only way, and mental flexibility. And
Absolutely.
you, I think, and I'm not saying this to boost your ego, but your answer, the fact that you would have a board, shows me and everyone listening that you practice mental flexibility, meaning that you know that say you wear glasses. Do you wear glasses, Nico?
I don't.
You don't wear glasses.
Real quick, just for those of you listening, I have 2010, which is actually better than 2020.
Are you
So
serious?
I've got pretty good eyes. I could read the bottom line.
Holy moly. Wow.
Yeah.
I've never even heard that before, but say you did wear glasses. Now your glasses, through those pair of glasses, you could only see the world that's right in front of you. But if I give you my set of glasses, you're going to see a world that might look a lot different. But the fact that you're willing to have people with their own individual glasses sitting around you, making the decisions, that's powerful, because you're saying that my way isn't the highway. It isn't the only truth. It's just simply my truth. And that's something that a lot of people could take away from, and thinking about their own personal growth and development as well, having that mental flexibility. And that's a great place to start. Now, something that I've also noticed during this conversation that has been prevalent the entire time is that you've been a guy that has been able to look at your circumstances and not say that my circumstances define my outcome or they define who I am. Now, take this into your coaching practice and what you do now. in which a lot of people have that mentality. And one big reason is because, once again, they're never taught to look otherwise. They're just told to look back, and whatever has happened in your past, that's who you are presently, and that's who you always will be. And that's what you just said, right? I think you just said something along the lines of whatever happened in the past doesn't have to happen in the future. Well, the person that you were in the past isn't the person that you have to be in the future neither.
Yes.
So how do you help clients free themselves? I'm going to say that, free themselves from their past and their circumstances, and enable them to say, let me put on a new pair of glasses and look at things differently and build my identity off of that, instead of just building my identity off of what I've been telling myself for 20 years.
Yeah. My best example of that is the class that I teach. So every Friday, we have Safe House Ministries, which is an awesome nonprofit. Great resources for previously incarcerated, so individuals recently released from prison, homeless, and those in drug rehabilitation programs. So, that's the population where that's very relevant, right? They're going into job interviews and saying, I have a 10-year gap that I can't explain unless unless I'm open with you about some of the things that I struggle with most, right? So one of the best books, and I actually have it, is Brene Brown, Gifts of Imperfection. She talks about self-worth and self-compassion, and really understanding that you are not your circumstances. You have self-worth. So the first time I have a new student in that class, we are immediately going into, hey, I don't care what you did, right? Because that's the whole thing. Well, you're supposed to go to jail, pay your dues, get out, and be given a second chance, and that frankly is just not occurring. There's a lot of very innovative businesses working to get felons jobs, and and I understand the trepidation in certain areas, but that's not what happens. So once they acknowledge, wow, there's other successful people too who have hit rock bottom and still been able to go somewhere, maybe I can too, right? Robert Downey Jr., he's a huge advocate about being open about his past, and frankly, he had to be, but look what you can do. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then I think it's just realizing that the only way we're not worthy of anything is if we're comparing ourselves to somebody else. And guess what? We're always going to compare ourselves to somebody else for whatever benefit it is to us, right? If I'm feeling down on myself, I'm going to compare myself to Devin, who's crushing his podcast, and I'm just sad and I suck and I should close my business because I don't have a podcast yet. And when I'm feeling good, I'm looking at the person that I perceive as weaker than me, and I'm like, man, at least I'm not that POS sitting over there, right? And we can't do that. We just have to say, hey, where was Nico 5 years ago? Is Nico doing better? Yep. Cool. Guess what? I'm good. Because I don't want to work with somebody, or I don't want my friends to be wondering, well, which one is which Nico's Nico. Like, look, that was me. I'm going to wear it on my hat. This is my past. Here's how I've grown from that. And here's how that growth has benefited me. Because I don't know about you, man. There's very little I've learned when I got it right on the first try.
Yeah, 100%.
I love failures. I love messing up. I love it, and I try to encourage my clients not to go out and fail, right? I'm
Of
not a
course.
failure coach, but to really acknowledge those failures and dissect them. And that's what we do in coaching, right? I'm not focused on your past, like a therapist or a counselor. I'm focused on the past only if it can help us in the future. So if you want to share something from your past with me because it's relevant to what we're doing now, I'm happy to listen to that. But we're going to touch there for about 2 seconds. We're going to hit our flashpoint and we're going to move on. And we're going to now use that knowledge, not that emotion, but that knowledge to help better improve our chances at getting where we're trying to go currently.
Right. And there's a good quote I like, and it goes, there's no failure, only positive feedback. Because
Yes.
every time you fail, you just find out another way. Who was it? Thomas Edison, right?
Yeah.
failed 9,999 times,
Yeah.
found out 9,999 ways not to do it, and then the 10,000th time he created the light bulb. But yes,
My less intellectual favorite quote of that is, "It's only happy accidents."
that's a good one.
You know, so what is that? Bob Ross or whatever the painter is. What's his name?
I don't know. I never heard that one. That's a good one.
He was a dude on TV, and he'd mess up. He'd be like, "Oh, there's a happy accident." You know, and it's so like a kid, right? It's like, dude, don't filter it, man. Look at Instagram. We are all like, man, look at this Instagram influencer. Look at the house strat. It's like, dude, like we know it's not legit.
Mm-hmm.
You guys know that when I posted pictures of me cutting my hair, I picked the good ones. Right? Like I didn't pick the one with the snot in my nose, or when I got frustrated, or when I looked sad. I picked the one that I wanted people to see. And I try, especially on stories, to show people the sides of me that that are unfiltered.
Yep.
But we just don't think about it sometimes, and we get so caught up, and it's like, dude, just laugh. You know, playing a stupid game, you lie, you get caught. All of a sudden we're fighting. It's like, dude, just laugh. Be like, yeah, you caught me, dude. I tried to lie. You busted me. Good job. And laugh it off and move on. Because if you don't, it's not going to change anything, except now you're stuck and pissed and whiny.
It just disempowers you.
Exactly. Take the power back.
Have you ever heard of Homeboy Industries?
I have not.
Oh, you have to, trust me, have to look up Homeboy Industries. So I've also done some, and I think we talked about this when we sat down for coffee, but I've done some in-depth work with homeless community as well. And in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, they have this great organization that was started by a priest named Father Greg Boyle. Father Greg is like a big time like speaker all over the world now because of the Homeboy Industries. But what it is, it's an organization, and they have one physical location that is in Los Angeles, but they take ex-gang members, felons, and just, I mean, you go there and I mean, first time I went there and the people I was with when I went there, I mean, it was like, you're a little scared. Cause like you see dudes and dudettes that like have tattoos all over their face, their head, like they still sag their pants. But the thing that a lot of us didn't notice while we were there was that these people weren't bad. They were there to get better. So Father Greg has a whole in-depth program that he teaches people how to get jobs, how to dress, how to talk, gives them jobs in the restaurant that is attached to Homeboy in the Homeboy industry. It's like called Home Girl or Homeboy Cafe, but it's awesome. But all of these people are sent there, and there's all these stories about Father Greg, how he's transformed all of these people's lives. And yes, the reason why they still do sag their pants or whatever the case may be is because that's just like how they grew up. That doesn't mean that they're a bad person. But once again, the pair of glasses that we have will determine the reality that we see. But look that up because
sorry, go.
No,
I was going to say
we're excited right now.
Yeah. Well, and that we're just so on the same wavelength, but what's so cool about that is how awesome did it feel when all of a sudden your perception was very, aggressively challenged, like to your face, and they say one word and you're like, wow, that's not even the tone of voice I expected, or wow, this guy with tattoos who's 57 has been in jail for 20 years just taught me something. And that's when we start to grow. And you talked a lot about understanding people. And I think everything we've talked about starts with empathy. The second that you really try to put on that other person's glasses and see what they're seeing, that's when it all starts to make sense. And the right decision just becomes easy.
Yeah.
Not judging a book by its cover, giving somebody grace, like that becomes simple because you're like, dude, how many times do we hold a grudge on somebody for something we've probably done to somebody else, and we're mad they held a grudge? And it's like, dude, why? Let me be empathetic for 2 seconds. And what that's going to allow me to do is be able to either A, see through others' glasses, or B, acknowledge that even if I can't see through others' glasses, there is another perception or perspective out there. Because I empathize on some things. Great. You cry, I cry. It just happens. You break a leg. I literally feel that. Sometimes I can't, but it's not that I now am disconnected from you. Now I have to give my trust to you and say, I have to trust that they have another perspective, and that I can learn from them explaining it, even though I can't see it, right? Because we can't see right up on a star, but when people who have explained it enough, we start to be able to picture that in our mind.
Yep. And the best part of that visit was, yes, we got a tour of the whole facility. I mean, it's literally amazing. You have to look it up, especially because you love service and working with that population so much. But
I see the picture; it's huge.
it's huge. And if you ever go to LA or California, it's a must, because they'll also give you a tour guide, and that tour guide is one of the people
Awesome.
who's going through the program. So in my case, my tour guide was an ex gangbanger for like 20 years, who was in prison, who sold drugs, who got shot, who shot other people. And then you listen to this human speak, and it's like, holy moly, like that was impactful.
And it gives you hope. You're like, look, some people did do something stupid and they know it, but now when they acknowledge that and truly acknowledge that, like you're sharing, that's a beautiful thing that I wish more people experience, right? Because I'm a firm believer that for those in jail, we're all one bad night away from that have been us. If you're like in Georgia, you have one beer with dinner, God forbid a tragedy happened, that's a DUI, and you could be that normal guy in jail for 10 years who had never done anything wrong. So you have to really like you're saying, be empathetic, put their glass on, and acknowledge the fact that, hey, that could have been me more than one time in my life had I not stepped right instead of left.
Right. And it's not easy though, because
Absolutely.
we have that confirmation bias that we,
Yeah.
we only want to agree with things that are line with what we're seeing as being reality. And it's only when we're willing, and it goes against how we were created as humans, right? Our brains were designed to protect us, and anything that goes against what we believe is making us feel unprotected. Therefore, we want to just shoo it away. And that's why the example that I use is, like, if I'm a conservative, I only watch Fox News because CNN is the worst. I only want to watch what I agree with. Or if I'm a liberal, I only watch CNN or whatever the case may be, because that's what's right, and Fox News is horrible.
Or I
But
get on Facebook and it does it for me.
yeah, of course. Let me just reshare this because the one blurb I see looks right. And it's just unbelievable. But I think a good way to probably close the conversation, and there's one question I ask everybody, and that'll be after this. But
Perfect.
having empathy with other people is one thing, but having empathy with yourself is another. Like we were saying, and writing the new narrative for what you want. So just to touch briefly on what you were saying, because if there's one thing that I am most keen on and I really want to develop into like a framework one day, is I have a theory that there's three parts to our story as an individual. There isn't only the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. That's, the internal dialogue and so forth. But there's a story that we tell the outside world about who we are. Exactly what you said. We put a filter on ourselves and then we present that to the outside world. This is who I am. And then that becomes what the world thinks of who we are. Compare that to the story we tell ourselves about who we are, the internal dialogues, the internal conversations, the picture that we have of ourselves. A lot of the times that is in complete incongruence with what we put out to the public.
Yeah.
And then compare that with the story that we want to tell ourselves about who we are, or the person that we want to become.
Yes.
And in my opinion, it's only when we live these three parts of our story in congruence with one another that we can actually get to our goal or that achievement or become that person that we want. But so now the penultimate question is, in your work with people and your versatile field, I mean, being in the military, doing all of this, that, and the other thing, what really enables a person to find something that compels them to keep going? Because combat, I haven't been there, but from what I think about it, there could be a lot of times that you just don't feel like going anymore because of what you're going through.
Yep.
So what can a person do or focus on to create a compelling vision for themselves that will enable them to push through the hard times that will inevitably come?
Yeah. I hate to give, Simon Sinek any more credit, start with why, right? He's a phenomenal speaker, author, everything. You have to know why you're doing it. But I think too is in every aspect of life, always setting up some type of internal reminder for yourself to challenge where I'm coming from. Am I coming from the heart? And I think that anything you do, if your heart's in it, you're going to get through it. And you see that play out time and time again. The kid that, doesn't really want to play football, but dad loves football, so he pushes him to it. Eventually he quits and he plays soccer. The kid that, the dad that loves outdoorsmanship pushes it so hard that he's got a kid that loves to game. I think that you really just have to step back. You really have to just kind of understand the entire environment. You have to understand everything that's going on around you, and then say, hey, there's a way out of this. And because I know my why, because I really have done what you kind of touched on and aligned my three selves, if you will, or my three perceptions of self, or whatever you name it when you become rich and famous someday, that once all that stuff aligns, it just starts to happen, and all ships rise with the tide. So, while you and I acknowledge all three of those have to happen concurrently in order to see the maximum usage of that theory, not getting all three at a time is not a failure, right? Work on one. Okay. Work on the other. Oh man, I started forgetting about that. Now bring the two back together. Okay, let's add the third, right? So everything in life for me is a building step. And when deployment felt really, really hard, I thought about, how is this going to affect me down the road? Right? I'm the guy who, some people think I'm hyper aware, and I am, but if I'm in a coffee shop and anything were to happen, right? Active shooter scenario, natural disaster, just a generator explodes, I'm constantly thinking about how I would react in those moments and how I could best serve the people around me in those moments. So, similar to empathy, but more individualistic, visualization. I think hands down, it comes down to visualization. You've got to visualize the worst case scenarios, the out of the blue scenarios, the blindside scenarios. And if you've thought about them all, when one of them happens, that's going to trigger in your brain, okay, initiate sequence C, because that's what I had visualized. And every Olympic athlete uses this, military uses it constantly. I'm visualizing every room, every turn before I hit a compound. I could go through it with my eyes closed before I go in there, right? So when I take that turn and something's there, I'm not thinking about my next turn. I'm free to think about the target in front of me. So the more that you visualize and you're prepared for any shoot off of the main scenario or the main objective, is going to better prepare you to take action in that moment. And I think that's the biggest differentiator, is being able to visualize all those scenarios and then being prepared to trust trust your visualization process, so that you can almost subconsciously turn right when you're supposed to turn right. Military, you throw me on a bird today, I could still faster up or jump out of that airplane to a T the way it's supposed to happen, because I've done it so many times and I've thought about it so many times and I've pictured it in my head step by step so many times.
Oh man, that's great. That gets me fired up, because that's
Yeah.
one thing that I am so passionate about too.
And it's free, and you could do
That's
it anywhere, like you're
right in
stressed,
your head. Oh man.
dude, and it doesn't have to be big, like life-saving stuff. It's, you're overwhelmed with school, visualize what it feels like when that's done. Visualize what an effective but not draining day looks like, and then do that. But we don't. We just put it all on lists. We start doing it. We get burnt out by 3. Tomorrow's useless because I'm done.
Right.
But if I visualized it and said, what's a good but productive day feel like? What does a week of that feel like? At the end of that week, when I'm fixed my problem, what's that feel like? Then it doesn't matter when it gets hard or when there's friction, because I already know what that feeling is, and that tastes so freaking good. I'm going to put up with the line at USPS, because I know that when I get whatever thing in the mail to finish my project, I'm done. Right? So it keeps you motivated.
Yeah, that's literally what I did in college. Like literally.
Yeah, for real.
And then other people on the outside looking in, it's like, how are you able to do that so consistently?
Yes.
But to you, it's like, well, it's not really all that hard, because I understand the concept that we're talking about. Like, I knew I wanted that thing, and I was so emotionally attached to it that it didn't matter what the hell was in front of me. And
It
that
could be a pen, and you're like, it's a day late. What the heck?
Right.
Expectation violation theory. When we set an expectation, when it's violated, whether it's a reasonable reaction or not, we're upset.
Mhm.
And it hurts us because we set so many expectations on so many things nowadays that we're setting ourselves up to be frustrated and disappointed instead of just allowing the process to work out and wait 2 extra days for the book or the puzzle that you ordered in the mail, you know?
Yeah, I think we're all victims of having that mentality. I know I am for sure.
Absolutely.
But have you ever read the book or heard of the book First Things First by Stephen Covey?
Heard of it, have not read it.
Oh, you got to read it, man. It's all about doing
It's on
what's
my list.
all about what's important, not only doing what's urgent. And man,
Yes.
it's a phenomenal book. I just mentioned that because that's a little bit about what you brought up.
I'll
Now,
check it
I was
out.
only going to ask you one more question, but I got to ask you this too because I love what you're talking about. So, what distinguishes you or makes you unique as a coach?
Yeah. Great question. And that's probably the main question of every coaching cohort, every peer coach. Wait, how do you do it? How do you separate it? Right. And it goes back into that differentiation without niching. And for me is I'm real, right? I'm not the dude who's gonna show up in a suit and tie and try to play some part for you. And for some people, that's their style, and I respect that. But with Nico, you're getting Nico. When my hair's long, it's long. When I'm wearing my gym clothes, you're getting my gym clothes because I want to challenge people a lot like CrossFit. Look, I'm not the most professional guy for those of you who are professionals, but I'm not the dirtbaggiest guy for those of you who are not professionals. And I really want to challenge bridging that gap and saying, look, you look at T-Mobile. You know, it's like you can own a multi-million dollar business and still have a fun personality and still whatever that is to you, not fun for me, but you could still have your quirks and be silly and be goofy and wear a pair of sweatpants on a Saturday without being worried that somebody's going to see you and you don't look professional. Um, and then I think lastly is back to the kid thing. You know, I just um, people don't call me a kid, but they sense this childlike comfortability with me, and it was always weird growing up because kids and dogs just come. I'm good with them, right? And you know, in college you use that to your advantage. You're like, oh yeah, dogs and kids love me. Like I'm a good person. But as an adult, what I've come to realize is you can sense that, you know, and even with each other, you know, if you and I go in a room with 30 people, especially you and I mean, we could leave there in 20 minutes. You're not allowed to talk to anybody and pretty well be able to digest some of the different personalities in the room, some of the different dynamics that exist. Um, but that's because we're kids and we look for the little things and we look for the nuances or the inconsistencies in communication because it fascinates us. Not because we want to catch somebody and make them feel bad, but because we truly, genuinely want to understand what people are thinking. And when I can excite somebody with that mindset, my job becomes way easier. Because then
Hmm.
they're honestly, it becomes busier but easier because I'm not doing the research. Now they're texting me, hey, have you read this book? Hey, have you heard this theory? And then that's fun for me because now I'm getting to research stuff. You know, I'm not getting paid for it at that point, but it's going to help me help somebody else and help crystallize their knowledge so then they're helping somebody else. Now we got two coaches, right? One's a
Yeah.
certified coach, but one's just a person in life helping support somebody else, coaching them.
Yeah, the course I'm taking once again, I it's a great course, but anyways, the person who runs the course, he says you could teach a person how to you can give a person fish and then
Yep,
the next day he'll come back and you have to feed him again. You
absolutely.
teach a person to fish, then he could feed himself. But if you could teach a person how to teach a person how to fish, then you end world hunger. And I think
Exactly.
that is a great way to put it. And that leads me to the last question, which will
Yep.
be in terms of contribution that you want to make to society, to your family, to the ones you love, to the ones you want to impact. What is that contribution, number one? And then as you think of your legacy, what do you want that to be?
Yeah. I'm going to start with the legacy just because it's easier. The legacy, honestly, I just want people to, you know, remember me as somebody who didn't just challenge them, but challenged myself. And somebody who genuinely cared about people. And it's hard coming from the military because you have just this stern demeanor. I'm a 205 pound, 6 foot dude. I'm naturally intimidating, so it's hard for people to see the soft through the hard exterior sometimes. But my wife knows it, you know, like if our friends have to cancel plans for something, like I take that personally, and not in a, oh, they had to cancel plans to go see their mom or something. Just like, oh, I'm sad. Like I'm literally sad because I want that connection. Um, and restate the first half real quick so I answer it correctly.
Just what is the contribution that you hope to
Yeah.
make?
Yeah. So my contribution, and that's why I started with the legacy, is really, um, I want every person that I see or have any ability to reach, to feel loved. I mean, that is you know, I think as you get older, I was thinking about this yesterday. I've had 4 people close to me, 2 family, 2 very close, well, 1 very close friend and another close friend, pass away. And I'm realizing, you know, as you get older, you know more and more people. So there's more and more likelihood that you're going to be touched by cancer and death and, you know, all the evils of the world. The longer you're around, the more you're exposed to that. And I'm constantly just feeling sad about the people that don't have connections with others or feel that they don't, the people that are looking for help and don't. And I'll finish on a quick story. My first 2 days in college 10 years ago, um, I'm in this freshman dorm, Neff Hall, you know, typical college dude, freshman, shirts off. I'm on the dude floor. We're all bros. Most of the football team's there, whatever. And there's this weird little girl, right? Kind of shorter and a little bit bigger, really curly hair, just didn't fit the typical, you know, oh, that's somebody I'm attracted to, you know, in 2008 in college. But later, that probably about 2 hours after we're all hanging out, she comes to my room and very forwardly says, I'm thinking about killing myself. And my jaw drops. I'm like, oh my, okay, like let's talk. Like, I'm not gonna leave you. And I escort her to the hall, our RA at the point, and then we get escorted down to the hall director. And I'm telling her, I'm like, look, I'm here for it all the way until she got to see a counselor. And, you know, I never thought a whole lot of it. And about 6 years later, she messaged me on Facebook and she said, I just want you to know that I thank you constantly because you saved my life that day. And I thought back to that day and I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I was shirt off, obnoxious, dumb, goofy, I think I'm the man guy in college. But what that really reconfirmed for me is my whole kid perspective on life, right? Is like, be goofy, because for every person who thinks that they have their life figured out, judging you for being silly or laughing or playing with the kids, right? Because my friends used to make fun of me. I play with the kids all day when we're at like group things and all the adults are over there. But you don't know that one person who needed you to be truly you, to feel comfortable, to ask you for help. And it's not always as dramatic as somebody contemplating suicide. Sometimes it's something small, but you have to be you and comfortable with you in order for other people to be comfortable with you. So my entire goal is to put myself in a light that shows people that I'm a trustworthy, charismatic person that really wants to support them, but then also proving that every day through my actions and through my grace and support of others.
Man, that is you're an awesome dude, man. I hope
I
you
just
know
love
that.
people, man. I could
I
talk
love it.
about it all day.
I love it because you just the authenticity that I see through this and other people will see it. It's awesome to see. And it's awesome to see that you are working with people and you're trying to help them live the same way. But of course, you're not telling them how to live. They'll figure that out for
Absolutely.
themselves. But you're just showing people that you show me, for example, that this is living life as a kid. That's going to be the title of this, living life as a kid. All right.
I'm going to do TED Talks throughout the year. I'm going to do learn like a kid, live like a kid, play like a kid. I'm going to do them all.
That would be awesome, man. And
Yeah.
and I think one of the major themes that we've talked about this whole time was perspective. And once again, I've learned something recently, and it comes from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an example in there, but the example is that this man is on the train with his kids, and there's another guy, like he's doing his work. He's a big business guy. He's doing all of this stuff. And the guy with the kids, his kids are running all over the train, making all this noise. They're crying, they're falling over the floor. And then the business guy is looking at the dad, and he's just thinking, what the hell are you doing? You see that I'm trying to, what is wrong with you? So he stayed patient. And he's like, I had enough. So he walks over to the dad and he tells the dad, what are you doing? Why are you not controlling your kids? I'm trying to work over here. I know you can see me. And the guy with the family, he turns to him and says, I'm really sorry, man. My wife just died and I can't really understand this. So I'm trying to grasp everything that's happening around me. And I'm sorry, kids, come over here. The man got some work to do. That totally shifts the guy's perspective who came over to him and was like, hey, fix your kids. Now it's like, I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah.
And that goes exactly to what you were saying with the female that you had that interaction with. The perception that you initially had of her compared to what she was actually going through, and the story that, oh man, that's just so powerful, man. And
I think
power. Go ahead.
I think the point in which that levels up is when you acknowledge those perspectives without requiring the explanation of that perspective, right? Because it's easy when that man shares his perspective and says, hey, my wife just died. It's harder, but much more powerful when those kids are running around, that you give that man the benefit of the doubt and the grace that without him having to share his perspective, I need to, personally, I operate under the assumption that there is something there. And if it goes on too long, I need to break that ice gently, knowing that I have no idea what they might share with me. And then it starts to just change your everyday dynamic. And then all of a sudden you don't think about it. You just start being more sensitive to those opportunities, and you start being more open to stronger discussions initially, as opposed to, snapping.
Right.
That's a great example.
Yeah, and that touched me. That touched me really deeply, that example, because it's so true. We do that all the time. I know for me personally, man, like if I'm sitting in traffic, and this is another example I heard of.
I love this one. I already know where you're going.
I hope you do. We're sitting in traffic and the guy in front of us is going really slow. And we're like, hurry up. You're so slow. You suck. Why are you driving this slow? And then somebody comes up behind us and they're driving on our ass. And we're like, you're crazy. You're going so fast. But like, you
almost simultaneously that can happen, and you still don't. You still keep it separate.
It's fascinating, man, and just the power of the perspective that we've been talking about this whole time. We're gonna have to do an episode 2 to this, definitely, because there's so much more I want to ask, but for time's sake, I will not ask. But Nico, lastly, where can people find you, reach out to you, ask you questions? Anybody with a brain should be asking you questions. So
so coachingbeyond.org is my website. Other than that, I'm pretty much Coach Nico J across all platforms. At the end of the day, you find me anywhere, reach out. It doesn't matter. I'm strongest on Instagram and Facebook, but wherever you reach me, I get notified, and I'm just happy to connect with people. And that's not a sales pitch. I'm looking for friends and mentees and clients and everything. So come knocking at my door for whatever reason, and I'm happy to connect.
Well, there we have it, guys. Living life like a kid. Thank you so much for being here, Nico.
Thank you for having me. It was a great opportunity.